everybody. Only knows what I mean. It's very curious. It's very strange doing a talk when I can't hear anything coming back because I keep getting worried that I'm not being heard. But let's hope for the best. I don't know whether you can see my face, but I'm hoping you can see my slides. All right. So I've just got 20 minutes. So I'm just briefly going to give you guys an update on what's going on. I know that pretty much everybody in the audience is familiar with the work of Sense Research Foundation and the concepts underlying it, which I first put forward 18 years ago now. So I'm not going to spend very much time on that. I'm just going to remind you that life expectancy has been going up for a long time. And of course, that's good news. It means that we have minimized the number of people who are dying early in life. But it's bad news in that more and more people are getting the chronic, progressive problems of health in old age, which last a long time and cause a great deal of suffering. And of course, a great economic burden. This is some data from the US, and the green line shows the percentage of the US economy that is spent on medical care. Between 1960 and 2010, it went up by almost a factor of 3.5, from about 5% to about 18%. Insane amount of increase. And that's because most of us are living to the point where we get sick and we stay sick for a long time before we die. So you all know that the main reason why this happens is because the health problems of old age have been much more difficult to overcome than the infections which used to kill so many people early in life. And that's partly because of the complexity of aging, all of these many things that go wrong with us, but it's mainly because of what aging is. Aging is this process where throughout life, metabolism, the processes that keep us alive, create damage, and eventually that damage causes health problems because the body is only set up to tolerate a certain amount of damage. So that means that the thing that we mostly try to do today to keep people healthy late in life is never going to work because it is attacking the pathologies of late life directly, even though those pathologies are inevitably going to get worse because damage is continuing to accumulate. This is why we make that mistake. We have an incorrect definition of aging in our heads. Most people in the world still think that aging is this bizarre, weird thing that's nothing like disease over on the right-hand side of this table. They think that it's kind of impossible to treat with medicine because it's natural and universal and inevitable and all that kind of nonsense. And of course, if you understand what aging really is, just that it's the lifelong accumulation of damage, and that the damage can only be tolerated until the time that we have too much of it, then it's easy to see that this is the correct definition of how we get sick, that the so-called diseases of old age should actually be considered as part of aging. And this helps two things. It helps psychologically, because it means that people can stop thinking that the things on the right in column 4 are off limits for medicine. They can understand that they are just like column 3. And the other way it helps is technologically, medically, because it helps people to see that we should not expect to be able to eliminate the things in column 3 or column 4 using the same kind of medicine that we use for column 1. Now, 100 years ago, people said, well, okay, so geriatric medicine isn't going to work, and let's try instead to take some hints from nature. Let us try to clean up the way that the body works, try to make the body run more cleanly and create damage more slowly. And let's do that by trying to copy what some long-lived organisms in the living world already do, because there is obviously a lot of variation between different species in how long species live and how slowly they age. That has also been completely unsuccessful. For this reason, metabolism is ridiculously complicated. As you all know, this is just a simplified diagram of a small, tiny subset of what we know about how the body works. And even this would be completely impossible to tweak so as to stop it from creating damage without having unintended consequences. So the solution to all of this is, of course, the damage repair approach. To leave those two component processes alone, the process where metabolism generates damage and the process where damage generates pathology, and instead to separate those processes from each other by periodically repairing some of the damage, so that even though it's continuing to be created at the rate that metabolism normally creates it, nevertheless, the damage will not reach this level, which is more than the body can tolerate. And of course, I call this the common sense approach because it's what we already successfully do for simple machines like cars. So there's absolutely no reason why we should not be able to do the same thing for complicated machines like the human body. The damage, of course, is more complicated in the human body than it is in a car, but it's manageable. All of the types of damage that happen in the body, all of the consequences of being alive that eventually cause problems in old age, can be classified into these 7 categories on the left-hand side of this table. And the reason that that classification is useful is simply because of the right-hand side of the table. In other words, the fact that we can describe specific ways in which each of the things on the left can be repaired. In some cases, we are already pretty close to getting this working. In fact, the top one, cell loss, which is repaired by stem cells, is an area in which Sense Research Foundation has never really worked very much, because even by the time that we created the foundation, it was already a very established field, it was well funded by other people, and we did not have to spend our very small budget doing a little bit more. However, I should now mention that for the past year or so, I have also been working part-time for Mike West's new aging company, AgeX, which is, you can see the logo at the bottom of the slide. And AgeX, of course, is focused on stem cells, so the same way that Mike West's previous companies have also been largely focused on stem cells. And the work being done there is extremely important, but I point out that AgeX is a private company, and that's because it can be. Private companies can only exist when the underlying technology is far enough proven that investors can get interested and can actually see how eventually they would make profit out of it. And I'm pleased to say that around the time that I joined AgeX, when it was created last year, I was also able to get some of our donors to Sense Research Foundation, interested in contributing to the initial round of investment that got AgeX going. And more recently than that, AgeX has actually been funded even more heavily. One of the major donors and investors in this area is a company called Juvenescence, which I will talk about some more in a few minutes. But Juvenescence now owns about half of AgeX. And that's exactly what I like, because in the past, people with the right intentions and the right technology have tried to form companies and make more progress in the science because they have more money from investors than they could get from philanthropy or from the government. And it's been a complete waste of time because initially everything goes well, but then the investors are too short-termist. They want to make money quickly, and they divert the direction of the company into working on stuff that may have some limited benefit in the short term, but it doesn't scale. So they don't get any real value from having created a company in the first place. I am very confident that that's not going to happen this time. Companies like Juvenescence, even though they want to make money, and they definitely have a lot of money to invest, these people are just as focused on the mission of really bringing the end of aging forward as you and I are. These are the kind of investors we want. And that's why I'm so happy with the way that this field is now going. Okay, now as you know, Sense Research Foundation was created a decade ago as a non-profit because of the lack of work, the lack of enthusiasm among the wider world for most of the other things on this table, for the technologies to repair these other types of damage. But we've been able to change that, especially over the past 3 or 4 years, we've been able to publish in high-profile journals some really groundbreaking advances in some of the most difficult components of science, which have made people realize that these very difficult problems are actually not impossible. In most of these cases, people understood the nature of the problem decades ago, and they also understood the nature of the potential solution. But they thought that it was so hard that they just decided to work on something that was easier so that they could get their nice, papers in high-profile journals quickly or frequently so that they could get their next grant application funded and get their promotions and their tenure and so on. And that's fair enough, but unfortunately, it doesn't get the real work done. That's why Sense Research Foundation has benefited so hugely from being an independent organization which chooses its research on the basis of what problems are the most important rather than on the basis of peer review. So we are very, very proud of these breakthroughs that we've made. And I should emphasize that this list here is just a very small subset of the papers that we've published over the past few years. Also, I'm sure you know that the academic community has very much come around to endorsing and believing in this work, even though 10 or 15 years ago, I had to engage in a lot of fighting to legitimize this, to get people to understand that, that these ideas made sense. Nevertheless, that is over now. There are very few people left who are still saying that this work is somehow unscientific or unrealistic. This is our scientific advisory board. All of these people are world-leading scientists in the various areas that we pursue. And of course, this work is now being reinvented. Since I'm speaking to a Spanish audience, I should probably mention the fact that this paper, which has become so influential over the past few years, had a couple of authors who are very prominent scientists in Spain, and who are, in fact, most of the authors were Spanish scientists. And this is pretty much identically the same idea that I put forward more than 10 years earlier. They've divided aging into 9 categories instead of 7, but so what? They haven't come up with anything that we overlooked. It's just a different way of subdividing the questions. And they've got their corresponding repair approaches. So it's the exact same idea. And the important thing for me, the most important thing, is that this paper is being noticed. This paper, in fact, is going to be, by a long way, the most highly cited paper in the whole of the biology of aging this decade. It's already been cited more than 2,000 times. So the idea of comprehensive damage repair is now completely established in the expert community. And that was a big battle, but we're done now. We've been done for quite some time. This is something that we can really be very proud of. So now you all know this, that we don't work on longevity, we work on health, and longevity is a side effect. But I think to this audience, to a transhumanist audience, it's very important for me always to repeat this, because you guys have to remember that when you talk to other people who are not so convinced of the value of this work, you absolutely have to say this every time. It is so easy for people to escape into this crazy, fictitious world where the work that we are doing is geared towards trying to keep people alive for a long time in a bad state of health. People are really, really fond of that interpretation, so that they are able to pretend that aging is some kind of blessing in disguise, and they can put it out of their minds and not think about it and not support it. And we've got to fix that. We don't have to get everybody to agree with us, but we have to get a few more people to agree with us than what we have today, because still, even though the industry of rejuvenation technology is emerging, we are still very underfunded. Still, a lot of the work, especially a lot of the most difficult work that is still going on in the foundation, has still, it could be going twice as fast, at least, if it had a bit more funding. So a little bit more enthusiasm matters, and your advocacy matters. So do your advocacy right. Whenever you find that anybody is talking about longevity, tell them not to. Ask them whether they want to get Alzheimer's. Ask them whether they want anybody else ever to get Alzheimer's, and focus them on that. Do this. Don't let people get into these crazy arguments about where will we put all the people, or doesn't death give meaning to life, or won't it be boring living to 150. Focus on the things on the right. focus on the things that are uncontroversial. First of all, the fact that health is good. Being sick is bad. Nobody wants anybody else to be sick. Second, focus on the fact that the magnitude of the health problem we have today, with 90% of medical care going on the problems of old age in the developed world, with the average lifespan worldwide having got to 72, so that even in the developing world, this is definitely the number one health problem. The magnitude of that problem is so much bigger than the magnitude of any problem that might be created by the solution to the problem we have today. Focus them on having a sense of proportion. And also, above all, focus them on the fact that we should not be making these choices on behalf of humanity of the future. People in the future will know whether they have solutions to avoid the problems on the left, and they should be able to make the choice whether to use these therapies and how to use them. Always focus on these things when you are talking to people who still need to be convinced that the problem of aging is the world's biggest problem and the crusade to defeat aging is the world's most important crusade. All right, so I know I don't have very long left. I'm just going to spin through a few of the other companies that exist in this space. I'm going to focus initially on the ones that Science Research Foundation has created using technology that we worked on for, in many cases, 6 or 8 or even 10 years, sometimes without any publications to show for that, but we were able to get them far enough to be able to create startup companies that have got investment. Probably the most successful of those companies so far is iCore, which has received so far at least $20 million from investors, which is, 4 times our whole annual budget at the foundation. They're working on a number of different things. They started out working here on macular degeneration, using technology that we transferred to them, having worked on it ourselves for a long time. They're now working on senescent cells as well, among other things. Covalent Bioscience, a company that's just in the process of getting its first funding round. It's already raised more than $500,000. They're working on amyloidosis, which you probably know is the #1 killer of really older people, over 100, over 105. Aragos is a fantastic company created by the person who used to be our chief operating officer, Tanya Jones, along with her ex-Alco colleague, Steve Van Sickle. And they're working on a way to make cryopreservation of organs far less damaging than it is today. This technology is extraordinarily exciting, and again, they've already been able to attract more than $1 million of seed funding, so they're moving pretty well. And of course, the relevance for cryonics is very obvious, and I believe that this is the future of cryonics. Then there's Ocean, which are working on senescent cells. You have probably heard of Unity Biotechnology, the real biggest company in the rejuvenation biotech world right now. They have raised more than $300 million, and they're worth nearly $1 billion. Ocean is kind of benefiting from being in the same space. There are a number of other companies, including a very important one called Senolytics, based in Spain, working in this area. So the elimination of senescent cells is really making a big difference to the legitimacy and the credibility of rejuvenation technology right now. But of course, we've still got a foundation. The Sense Research Foundation is still a non-profit, a charity. People in Europe can also donate to it tax efficiently because we have an affiliate charity through which it's possible to donate. If anyone wants to know more about that, you should just contact us. But we need this charity because we've still got a number of projects which are still too early stage to be created as companies. And that's going to carry on being true for at least a few years. But we really think that at least most, probably all, of the sense components can be in clinical trials by 2021. That's why we call this Project 21. We said that 3 years ago, and we're still saying it. So the time frame has not even slipped. That's out of date. Of course, you know this book. It was translated into Spanish and Portuguese. The Spanish version was published by an enthusiastic supporter of ours, Carlos García, a couple of years ago, and it's obviously still available. I hope you will be able to get hold of it. But you should also know that even though the science of sense has not had to change because it has progressed exactly in the way that we predicted 10 years ago in this book, nevertheless, the industry is exploding right now. It's already going as fast as the dot-com boom went in its early days. And it's going to become even bigger than the dot-com industry did, because the fact is everybody's got aging. Everybody is a customer. Now, I mentioned just 4 companies that we've spun out. We've already spun out a couple more. There are a couple of dozen other companies that we work closely with because they're doing very similar work, very aligned work that we believe in. And there are lots and lots of very wealthy investors now getting more and more interested in this. So it's going much faster now than it was even 3 years ago. But it still needs to go faster still. So all of you need to go out there and do your bit to get more people involved in this crusade. Thank you very much. And I still can't hear anything, even the applause.